There are two voices in writing, active voice and passive voice. What is active voice and what is passive voice? It's important to know the difference because voice plays a significant role in our writing and speaking. When we use active voice, we use a strong, direct tone. Whereas when we use passive voice, we use a weaker tone or a more polite tone in our delivery. Now, to identify active voice and passive voice in sentences, we simply need to know these two notable facts. First, active voice is used in sentences when the subject performs the action. Number two, passive voice is used in a sentence when the subject receives the action. These two notable facts will help us identify active voice and passive voice in sentences. For example, the dog chased the children. Let's examine this sentence so that we can determine if the sentence is in the active voice or the passive voice. The subject in this sentence is dog. The verb is chased and the direct object is children. Notice the dog is not only the subject of the sentence, but also the one performing the action. When the subject of the sentence is performing the action, the sentence is in the active voice. So keep in mind, when the subject of the sentence is performing the action, the sentence is in the active voice. Now let's look at another example. The children were chased by the dog. The subject in this sentence is children. The verb is chased by the dog is a prepositional phrase. Notice this time the subject receives the action. The children were chased by the dog. Therefore, this sentence is in the passive voice. In the first sentence, the subject and the one performing the action are the same. However, in the second sentence, the subject and the one performing the action are different. Active voice sentences usually follow this structure: subject plus verb plus direct object. Passive voice sentences usually follow this structure: subject plus verb plus prepositional phrase. Sometimes it may simply be subject plus verb. For example, all the food was eaten. In this sentence, we simply have a subject and a verb. But for now, let's look at another example. The cat chased the mouse. This sentence is in the active voice. The mouse was chased by the cat. Now this sentence is in the passive voice. When we change from active voice to passive voice, the subject becomes a prepositional phrase, and the direct object of the sentence becomes the subject. The passive sentence structure often involves a form of the verb to be, such as is, was, has been, followed by a past participle. This is also an important indicator of a passive voice sentence. Let's look at one more example. The policeman arrested the protester. This sentence is in the active voice. The protesters were arrested by the policeman. Now this sentence is in the passive voice. Again, when we change from active voice to passive voice, the subject becomes a prepositional phrase. It is usually introduced with the preposition by, and the direct object of the sentence becomes the subject. Notice also a form of the verb to be is used here, were arrested. That is an important indicator of a passive voice sentence. Why should we use active voice sentences? Well, active voice sentences are more clear and direct. They are more concise. They are easier to understand, and they are less work for your reader to grasp. If you want clarity and ease of understanding, use active voice sentences so that your readers can easily grasp what you are saying. When should we use passive voice sentences? We use the passive voice when the performer of the action is unknown or unimportant. For example, the project was completed on time. We use the passive voice in this sentence because we may not know who completed the project or it is not important to know. Let's look at another example. The email was sent this morning. We use passive voice in this sentence because we don't need to identify the sender. Furthermore, the sender is either not known or unimportant. We use the passive voice when the performer of the action is obvious. For example, the parcel was delivered yesterday. Most people would assume that the parcel was delivered by the postman, so there is no need to identify the deliverer. We use the passive voice when the action is more important than the one performing it. For example, many people were injured by the explosion. In this sentence, many people are highlighted rather than the explosion. A delicious meal was prepared by the chef. In this sentence, the focus is on a delicious meal rather than the chef who prepared it. We use the passive voice when we want to be more polite. For example, you should correct these errors. These errors should be corrected. Notice in the second sentence, the focus is shifted from the person doing the action to the action itself. This makes the request sound more polite and less direct. Let's recap active voice and passive voice. Active voice is more clear and direct, easier to understand, and less work for the reader to grasp. Passive voice is weaker in tone, but can be used when the performer of the action is unknown, when the performer of the action is obvious, when the implication of the action is more significant, and when we want to sound more polite. Also keep in mind the structure of active and passive voice sentences. Active voice structure usually involves subject plus verb plus direct object. Passive voice structure usually involves subject plus verb plus prepositional phrase, or simply subject plus verb. Hopefully this will help you identify active and passive voice sentences. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.